There are rest stops in the middle of the night, places where you think you only need a few minutes to rest. But it is in that very moment, where the streetlights dim, a shadow flickers by, and the silence is far too unnatural, that things start to go wrong. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't the loud noise, but the deathly silence. No one speaks. No one replies. But you know, you are no longer alone. If you enjoy chilling, realistic, and haunting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Each subscription not only gives me motivation to keep telling these late-night tales, but is also a great way to make sure you don't miss the next episode. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. And if you've already hit that subscribe button, I truly appreciate it. Now then, take a deep breath, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and don't forget, there are places you should never stop at. But if you already have, then let's just hope you're not the main character of the next story. Nothing makes an adult feel small again, quite like moving back in with their parents, especially after a failure. Julia knew that all too well. She once had her own life, a 2-bedroom apartment in Boston, a stable job, a seemingly long-term relationship. But then everything collapsed within a few weeks. A cold breakup, a few heavy arguments, and then suddenly, silence. He changed the locks. She packed her things and returned home. The town where her parents lived, a place so forgotten even maps barely bothered to update it, sat nestled among pine forests and abandoned fields. From afar, it looked as peaceful as a fall painting, but Julia knew better. Not everyone chooses to live cut off from the city. Some people had nowhere else to go. She was rehired at her old job at the local urgent care center, a place that once gave her refuge during college. They welcomed her back as if no one had ever left. But now, her shifts were all at night, from midnight until near dawn. Few patients, few words, more of the ticking clock and the buzzing of fluorescent lights like insects trapped in glass tubes. At 4 a.m. that morning, she left the center with an empty stomach and a foggy mind. Mist blanketed the road, and her car's headlights pierced through it like a thin, damp, and cold curtain. Julia decided to stop by a Shell gas station to fill up the tank. She figured she might as well grab something to eat. A cold sandwich, the kind you only choose when every other option is closed. The gas station stood alone by the roadside, dimly lit and eerily silent. Only one other car was parked there, a blue sedan, sitting quietly as if it had grown out of the darkness. Julia didn't know why, but the moment she stepped out of her car, she felt something off, as if something were watching her from behind, even though the lot was empty. She didn't know yet that this stop would be one she'd never forget for the rest of her life. That Shell station had never been a place Julia felt comfortable in, but it was convenient, on the way home and always open. She parked at pump number 3, grabbed her wallet, and stepped inside to pay with cash, a habit that saved her a few cents. The counter was empty. Only a drowsy employee sat behind bulletproof glass, playing a radio so quietly she couldn't tell what was on. After paying, Julia stepped back out. A gust of cold air hit her face and made her shiver. As she turned toward her car, she noticed another vehicle had just arrived, an old blue sedan parked at pump number 5, directly opposite hers. A man stepped out of the car. He wore a loose hoodie, the hood pulled up over his head. Julia tried not to pay attention, but that's hard to do when you're the only 2 people outside and the other person is staring directly at you. She turned away and began pumping gas. The sound of fuel pouring into the tank was the only thing in that space. Then, a voice rang out, gentle and unfamiliar. Want to see something funny?" Julia looked up. The guy was standing less than 10 feet away, one hand on the pump hose, the other raised. And he began doing the old finger pull trick, a childish illusion everyone had seen since kindergarten. He repeated it over and over, wearing a strange smile, his eyes locked onto her. Julia forced a smile, a crooked, dry one. Haha, funny. She turned away, trying to ignore him, but he stayed there, repeating that ridiculous trick again and again. His smile didn't change, but his eyes did. They grew colder, sharper, as if this wasn't a joke anymore, but some private, twisted ritual. When the nozzle clicked, signaling the tank was full, Julia let out a breath of relief, quickly removed the hose, and placed it back. She hurried toward the store to grab her change, but her eyes kept darting to the glass door. The blue sedan was still there, but the man was gone. She hesitated, scanning the lot. No one. Just his car, still pumping gas, hose in place. There was no way he'd just leave like that. A chill crawled down Julia's spine. She rushed back to her car. Before unlocking the door, she did something she rarely did. She bent down and checked the back seat. No one. But that didn't make her feel safer. She locked the door the moment she got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the gas station like she was fleeing. In the rearview mirror, the blue sedan remained, silent, senseless, and threatening. What Julia didn't know was that the car didn't stay behind at the station. Its headlights flicked on. It turned quietly after her and began to follow at a distance just far enough not to be noticed. A pursuit had begun, and unknowingly, she had invited it home. The drive home was short, barely 5 minutes, but that night for Julia, it stretched out like a dark, unsettling dream. She kept her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror the entire way, but the blue sedan was nowhere in sight. No headlights, no shadow of a car following her. Maybe he had taken another route. Maybe she had imagined too much. She wanted to believe that. When the car pulled up in front of the house, Julia quickly turned off the engine, got out, and grabbed the bag of food from the passenger seat. The air was cold, the path shrouded in mist. She wrapped her arms around herself and hurried to the porch. As usual, she reached under the small flower pot where her parents always hid the spare key. Unlocked the door. The hallway light wasn't on. The quiet was uncanny. She stepped inside, closed the door, locked it, and returned the key to its place, everything by habit. Then tiptoed into the kitchen to eat her late-night dinner, a cold sandwich and a wilted salad. But just as she was about to sit down, Julia heard a click. Not loud, not clear, just like the sound of the front door opening. She froze, went silent. Then, in a trembling voice, she called out, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. Her heart began to pound. Julia crept into the hallway, walking as silently as a thief in her own home. The living room was empty. The front door was closed. But the metal latch, the one she always fastened after coming in, was loose, as if someone had opened it, then shut the door without locking it again. Julia ran upstairs. She burst into her parents' room. They were still asleep. She woke them up in a panic. Her father jumped up instantly, gripping the wooden bat he kept beside the bed. They searched the entire first floor. Nothing. But when he went outside to check, the spare key was gone from the flower pot. Her mother was paralyzed with fear. She clutched Julia tightly, whispering through tears, "Didn't you check if anyone followed you? Didn't you see anything strange?" Her father checked every room. When he reached her brother's room, he was away on a business trip. He turned on the light and moved on. But Julia didn't. She stayed, frozen. She stared into the familiar room. the window slightly open, a faint glow falling on the cold wooden floor. Something felt off. Then, almost guided by instinct, she dropped to her knees and looked under the bed. Nothing. Then she moved to the closet, opened the doors. Also empty. But her eyes were drawn to the space under the desk. As if something pulled her toward it, she crouched down, and her heart seized. He was there. The man from the gas station, lying still like a corpse, eyes wide open, staring back at her, unblinking. His mouth twisted into a crooked smile, covered in dust. Julia screamed, a blood-curdling scream that tore through the silence. Her father rushed in, bat in hand. The whole family struggled with the intruder, a chaotic fight in the dark with shouts, crashing, and pounding. Finally, he shoved the door open and fled, vanishing into the mist. The police arrived soon after, but the intruder had taken the spare key with him and left behind a terror that would haunt Julia forever. The police left around 6 a.m. Dawn hadn't fully broken, but Julia knew she wouldn't be sleeping again that night, or any night, as long as she lived in this house. A patrol car was stationed in front of the gate, a silent reassurance. But to her, nothing could ease the feeling that she had brought the devil into her home. Her father, the man who once quietly repaired every hinge and stair in the house, now sat motionless on the sofa, holding a cup of cold coffee, his vacant gaze fixed on the front door. He had changed the locks that very morning and thrown away the flower pot that had hidden the key. Her mother was cleaning up broken things, wiping away the dried bloodstains on the floor as if trying to erase the evidence of something that had never happened. Julia sat in the corner of the room, eyes glued to the half-eaten sandwich on the table. She wasn't hungry, just cold. Cold in a place where even the morning sunlight couldn't reach. "You should have been more careful," her mother said, not scolding, just a sigh, as long as the night before. Julia didn't respond, because she was right. That man, he wasn't just watching. He had chosen her, and she, through a moment of carelessness, had opened a path for him to step into her family's life. That night, she hadn't seen any car following her. But now she realized sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones right in front of your eyes, but the ones hiding in the dark, waiting for you to slip, just once. And sometimes, it all begins with a seemingly harmless key, one that unlocks a door no one ever wants to walk through. There's a very specific kind of quiet when you're driving at 2 a.m. Not peaceful, but a strange stillness, as if the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Matt had always liked that feeling. A native of Long Island, he was used to traffic jams, honking horns, and people arguing outside fast food joints at midnight. But as he drove south toward Florida to visit his younger brother, he found himself enjoying the emptiness of the Yao Mai 95 highway at night. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just the glow from his car and the darkness wrapped around him like a theater curtain, where anything could appear. It was around 4 a.m. when his stomach started growling after 2 hours of running on coffee alone. Matt spotted a familiar sign, Wendy's, 1 mile from the exit. He didn't think twice and turned off. The place was deserted. No streetlights, no other cars. Wendy's emerged like a ghost sign still lit, but the inside was completely dark. The drive-through menu board was still glowing, so he pulled up and waited. No one responded. He called, "Hello?" a few times. No reply. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 hard knocks on the passenger side window nearly made him jump out of his seat. A man stood there, wearing a gray jacket, smiling. He motioned for Matt to roll down the window. Instinct told Matt not to, but he cracked it open a few inches. "This place isn't open yet," the man said. "My car broke down over there in the corner. Could you help me jump the battery?" Matt glanced at an old sedan parked near the tree line, partly obscured by shadow. The man said he had cables. Everything sounded plausible. Matt hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I believe in karma." As he steered his car closer to the man's, somewhere in the pit of his stomach, a faint whisper of unease began, telling him this particular karmic debt wasn't his to pay. And whatever was waiting for him in that dark corner wasn't a dead battery. Matt pulled up so that the front of his car was nearly touching the old sedan. As he stepped out, the cold air from the roadside woods hit his face. It was damp and smelled like rotting leaves. The man walked around to his trunk and pulled out a set of jumper cables, still smiling as if this was the most normal thing in the world at 4 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. Matt popped the hood and carefully attached the clamps to his car battery. The man did the same on his end. Once everything was connected, Matt restarted his engine, letting it run to charge. He stood with arms crossed, watching the man get into the driver's seat and try to turn his key. Nothing happened. "Probably needs a few more minutes," the man called out, voice calm and even. Matt nodded, trying not to show his growing discomfort. Everything seemed fine, but the uneasiness inside him was swelling. The man didn't look panicked or rushed, like being stranded in the middle of the night was exactly what he expected. His eyes lingered longer than necessary. The smile no longer felt natural. It was stiff, hollow, and fake. The man stepped out again, pulled out his phone, and began speaking in Spanish. Matt didn't understand the words, but the low, near-whispering tone sent a chill down his spine. "My friend says wait a bit longer, then try again," the man said, voice light as air. Matt nodded, but by now, all he wanted was to get out of there. As he bent down to double-check the cables, vroom, an engine roared from the left, then another from the right. Two large trucks sped into the lot from opposite directions, headlights tearing through the darkness like blades. Matt's heart flipped. What the hell? He understood instantly. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a setup. Without hesitation, he ripped the jumper cables off his battery in a flash, slammed his hood shut, and bolted toward his car. But it was too late. The two trucks had boxed him in. The man stood still, the smile still on his face, now twisted like a wooden mask. Without thinking, Matt sprinted into the woods. Branches whipped his face. The wet earth slipped beneath his feet. But he didn't stop. Behind him, shouting in Spanish rang out. At least 3 different voices. They were looking for him, hunting him. He dropped to his knees behind a large tree, gasping for breath, heart pounding like a war drum. Footsteps passed within dozens of feet, sweeping through the dark like impatient hounds. And then, silence. Matt lay flat, barely daring to breathe. In the darkness, he had only one hope, that they'd leave. But in a place where the light didn't reach, the only thing he knew for sure was this. He wasn't just a guy on a road trip anymore. He was prey, and he had just stepped into a nameless hunt. Matt lay motionless in the darkness, surrounded by sparse trees and thick underbrush. The smell of damp earth, rotting leaves, and his sweat clung to his skin like something that wouldn't wash off. The footsteps had faded, but he didn't dare move. His instincts screamed, one slip, one sound, one snapping twig, and he'd never leave this place again. Minutes passed, or maybe half an hour. Time seemed to lose all meaning. Then, beep, 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 a car alarm blared from the parking lot. Matt jolted. It was his car. The shrill sound rang out, echoing through the empty woods. Slowly, he crawled up and peered through the bushes toward the flickering light. The 3 vehicles, the sedan, the 2 trucks, were gone. Only his car remained, lights flashing wildly like it too was terrified. He ran, thoughtless, instinctive. Branches whipped his face, mud splattered up his pant legs. None of it mattered anymore. When he reached the lot, Matt stopped cold. The rear window was shattered. The back door hung open. Everything he had packed, suitcases, clothes, watch box, laptop, was gone. All that remained were scraps of fabric and a crumpled foil wrapper fluttering in the breeze. He couldn't hold it in. He slammed the steering wheel with his fists, his mouth open in a soundless scream. Everything he'd brought for the month, every keepsake, every possession, gone in less than an hour. With trembling fingers, he dialed 911. The police arrived nearly 20 minutes later. A young officer took notes, trying to keep his voice calm while hearing the story, but his eyes said something else. Matt knew. He'd heard stories like this before, and they rarely had good endings. That car had fake plates, the officer said. The 2 trucks had none at all. We'll check Wendy's CCTV if that camera still works. Matt only nodded. He already knew. Nothing would come back. No belongings, no justice. Only the lesson, expensive as a stripped-out car. On the road back to Long Island, the sky began to lighten. But for Matt, the night had never ended. Because he knew, wherever there's darkness, there will always be someone waiting for a good man, ready to help, to spring the trap. Matt drove home in absolute silence. No music, no podcasts, no voices, just the wind slicing through the window cracks, and from time to time, the bump of his tires hitting potholes. The morning light painted the sky in a dull gray, but for Matt, everything was still buried in an invisible fog, heavy, suffocating, like a waterlogged blanket pressed against his chest. The car was now empty. No suitcases, no laptop, no vintage watch his father had given him. He hadn't just lost belongings, he'd lost trust. The police called back 2 days later. "We'll continue investigating," they said. "We understand how you feel." But Matt knew, with no license plates, no working cameras, no witnesses, everything had vanished like predators into the night. What haunted him most was the look in the first man's eyes, the awkward smile, the way he said, "Don't worry, I've got the cables," as if it had all been rehearsed. And Matt, normally cautious, alert, had stepped right into the role they needed, the nice guy. Since then, he has never stopped at any roadside lot at night, never answered strangers tapping on his window. Every time he saw someone stranded on the shoulder, looking helpless, he just drove faster, because now he understood. Not everyone who needs help needs help. And sometimes, 1 minute of hesitation can cost you years of haunted memory. He still believed in karma, but now, he wasn't the one giving. He only hoped, somewhere, someday, someone would do the same to them. And this time, they'd be the ones trapped in the dark, with no way out. The highway at midnight holds a very particular kind of silence. Not peaceful, but the kind that makes everything around you feel like it has disappeared, leaving only you and an endless road. For Kevin, a technician on a grueling 15-hour cross-state drive, it was the hardest part of the journey. The coffee had worn off, his limbs were numb from sitting too long, and his bladder was screaming for release. When he saw the familiar green sign that read "Rest Area 2 miles," Kevin almost sighed with relief. It was one of those small roadside stops, just restrooms, a couple of stone benches, and a few rusty trash cans. But to him at that moment, it felt like an oasis in the desert. He pulled into the lot. One lone vehicle was already parked there, a dark-colored SUV with windows tinted pitch black. No one around, no sound. Only a dim yellow light flickering down from an old bulb mounted on the restroom wall. Kevin stepped inside. The air was cold and damp, like a walk-in freezer. And then he stopped. In the far corner of the room, with his back turned, stood a man, completely still, head bowed low, facing the corner wall far from the urinals. No movement, no reaction. Kevin briefly thought, asleep standing up? Drunk? But no drunk person stood that still, like a statue, in a freezing restroom at 2 a.m. He walked slowly, trying not to make a sound. He had to pass the man to get to the stalls. As he moved past, Kevin couldn't help himself. Logic and fear tangled inside him, and he asked quietly, "You okay?" No response, no movement, no sound. Just that tall, dark figure, utterly still, like it was part of the room. And that was the moment Kevin began to regret stopping there. Kevin stepped into the stall and shut the door, but his mind was still spinning with the image of the motionless man outside. It felt like he wasn't truly alone. Even behind the closed door, he could feel that shadow's presence. Not just another person, but something wrong, something fundamentally off. He tried to focus, but he couldn't. No sound of running water, no other noise. Just a deadly silence so complete he could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He pulled up his pants, opened the stall door, and froze. The man had turned around. He was now standing in the middle of the walkway, facing Kevin, no longer bowing his head. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, expressionless, as if they didn't belong to a living being. His face held no emotion, just pale skin, thin lips like a faint line, and faint greenish veins under his jaw. The air between them felt frozen. Kevin couldn't speak. His throat was dry. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring. Kevin took one step toward the sink. Those eyes tracked him the whole time, not breaking contact for even a second. He washed his hands quickly, didn't bother drying them, and made a beeline for the exit. Footsteps echoed behind him, light even, deliberate. He was being followed. Out in the lot, Kevin spun around but saw no one. The restroom stood silent, as if no one had ever come out. The door was still ajar. The flickering light above still buzzed. The black SUV was still there, motionless. Kevin jumped into his car, locked the doors, and started the engine. His headlights beamed straight at the old brick building, but no sign of a figure. The chill still clung to his neck, like someone was watching from behind the seat. He drove out of the lot as fast as he could. The road fell back into darkness, no cars, no lights. Kevin didn't dare exhale yet, because his gut told him this wasn't over. What he didn't know was that just a few minutes later, he would be forced to stop again, and this time, no one would be there to save him. Kevin tried to calm himself. "Probably just a weirdo," he muttered. "Nothing serious." But sweat still ran down his temple, and his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He still needed to use the restroom. His need hadn't gone away during the panic. Thankfully, about 20 minutes later, another rest stop appeared by the roadside. Same basic setup, a bare-bones restroom facility, old yellow lights, no sign, no other vehicles in the lot. "This time it's safe," he told himself. No SUV, no strangers, no signs of anything unusual. Kevin parked right in front of the building, kept the engine running, and left his headlights shining straight at the doorway. He moved quickly, head down, not planning to waste time. But just as he was closing the stall door behind him, the creaking sound came. A hinge groaning open. The front door. His heart pounded. Footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. Slow, heavy, deliberate, walking directly toward the stall he was in. Kevin looked down through the gap beneath the door and saw a pair of shoes. The same shoes from the previous restroom. Black, worn, dirty around the soles. Unmistakable. The figure stood still, right outside the stall. No movement. No words. Kevin opened his mouth to scream, but all that came out was ragged breathing. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone, quickly pulling up the emergency dial. He pressed 911, put it on speaker. 911, what is your emergency? A woman's voice rang loud and clear, echoing off the walls. Kevin yelled, "Someone's following me. A strange man is trying to get to me." Silence. The figure outside didn't react, but after a few seconds, Kevin saw the feet slowly turn away. Footsteps faded. The door creaked again, this time closing. Kevin didn't dare move right away. He gave his location to the dispatcher and requested police assistance. They told him to stay inside the stall. Help would arrive in minutes. When the knock finally came, Kevin opened the door. A police officer, a tall man with a stern face. "There's no one in the area," the officer said. "We searched the grounds. Can you describe the guy?" Kevin gave every detail he could. The dead eyes, the motionless stance, the filthy shoes. The officer nodded slowly, his expression darkening. "Sounds like a report we got about 3 months ago. Same description. Strange man. The victim at that time wasn't as lucky as you." Kevin didn't ask anything else, because in that moment he realized it wasn't just a stranger, it was something still wandering out there, and it had chosen him. Kevin was escorted back to his vehicle after the police declared the area safe. But safe was a distant concept to him now. Even with the car locked, the engine running, and the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruiser behind him, fear still gripped his sweaty hands. He pulled away from the rest stop and continued his journey. But every glance in the rearview mirror made his chest tighten, half expecting to see the black SUV following from a distance. He didn't see it, but not seeing it didn't mean it wasn't there. After that night, Kevin never stopped at rest areas after midnight again. He planned every trip, times, rest points, and avoided empty roads. One time, while refueling near dusk, he glanced into his side mirror, saw a man standing by the windshield cleaning station, head bowed, motionless. Same building, same dirty black shoes. But when he turned for a clearer look, he was gone. Even when fully awake, Kevin would sometimes hear footsteps in his dreams, slow, steady, approaching the bedroom door. Every dream ended the same way. 3 knocks. 3 knocks. Like the ones on his car window that night. He began documenting everything. Rest stops, dreams, locations, descriptions. A small notebook, growing thicker over time, as if he were tracking a ghost that was all too real. Because Kevin understood, not every stalker is human, and whatever had looked at him in that restroom that night was still out there, waiting for the next person to step through that door, unaware, unlucky, and with no way out. 3 stories, 3 journeys that seemed ordinary until they turned into real-life nightmares. If you've watched this far, thank you so much. Truly. Not everyone dares to sit through these stories in the middle of the night. If you found this video scary, suspenseful, or if it made you check your rearview mirror a little more carefully while driving, hit that like button so I know you're out there. And if you've ever experienced something strange, something chilling, leave a comment below. Who knows? Maybe your story will be told in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe because out there in the world, there are still so many things that haven't been told. See you next night, if you're brave enough to come back.